Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Shang-Chi. Of course, as the title says, there will be spoilers in the second half of this review, but I will let you guys know when we get to that point. But just to kick things off, I love the movie. Without a doubt, the villain is my number one villain in all of the MCU right now. I think he is, at least his personal story, he may not be like the best villain. It's hard to, even now, it's hard to top Thanos as the villain, considering everything that happens. But story-wise, there is not a single villain in the MCU where I care nearly as much as I'm gonna have to call him the Mandarin because he does go by a different name. But he basically just goes by his name in the movie, which I totally forgot what it was. But I'm gonna call him the Mandarin slash Tony Leung, I believe is the actor's name. But the Mandarin, like, he has the best story as far as I'm concerned. I was just like, this story it's real. It's a real story, and I was just like, I love this. This is better than most of the stuff we've gotten. The second closest I would definitely say is the dude from Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I can't think of his name. I'm totally drawing a blank. But of course, the guy from Civil War who, had everybody pitted against each other. And I thought he had a great story. I just feel like we didn't get to go as in depth. But his story, I would say, is kind of along the same lines of just like how personal it really is. It was far less just, I'm a bad guy. Same thing with Spider-Man, like at least the first one. It was like, okay, Vulture wasn't just the dude who was like, I'm the bad guy just because I'm the bad guy. It was like, I understand his reasons. Like, those characters I appreciate way more. And I think Shang-Chi, especially considering the villain was such a huge part of the actual story, considering the main villain is technically the main hero's father, they do such a great job where I was like, I think this is my number one villain just for the fact that we go so in depth with his character. And I care, like, they technically do go in depth with Thanos, but I'm like, this guy's an asshole. Like, honestly, he's just a douche. He was a douchebag. So I didn't care nearly as much because I'm like, he's just crazy. And I know he did like the one thing where he was right about his home planet being destroyed, and it was like, hey, look, I was right. So let me wipe out, half the universe. I'm like, that doesn't work, dude. Like, it doesn't. It's not connecting like that. But in Shang-Chi, it totally does. I won't spoil why until we get there. But I was like, yeah, I understand all of this. It's tough, it sucks. But I'm like, I get why this is happening, and I get why this dude is a villain, and I like the way that they handle it. Especially, going from the beginning of the film, they do some very specific things where you're just like, oh, I didn't know it was going to kind of play out this way. So I really like the way that they handled it as far as the villain story. The hero story, of course, was really well done too. And the action I have to talk about because I was definitely looking forward to it. I was like, okay, this and Snake Eyes actually were like the two movies this year. I was like, okay, the trailers look really good. That looks like real action. That looks like, that looks like some contact. I feel like I'm seeing some real contact here. So I was like, I feel like we're finally hitting a point where, at least over here, I mean, martial arts has not stopped, overseas, but over here it was kind of just like, action films are action films or whatever. But for the most part, action films over here in the States, when they're made, there's a lot of cuts. I mean, the greatest example is like Taken 3, and I think the first Born Identity movie, where it's just like so shaky, and they're like 1,800 cuts. Is like all they did was throw like a punch. It was like, there's like two punches and maybe like a one kick or something, and there's like 15 cuts. Like, that doesn't even make sense. So there are definitely some great examples you can check out, which I highly recommend. But as far as like people, I'm a big martial arts fan, so Snake Eyes, which did it well, they just had some issues there. Shaky cam was a little too much, but you could tell the action was there. And this, it was exactly what I was hoping for. Plus, the camera was steady enough. It was fantastic, especially the beginning fights. I would say it leans more into kind of classic MCU, real. I wouldn't say classic MCU. I would just say in general superhero stuff. As it gets towards the end, because of course it has to be the climactic comic book action battle. But they still do some hand-to-hand stuff, or at least very close to it. They at least use weapons and things like that towards the end. So I was like, okay, it's not as gritty, of course, because the first couple of fights are straight up just like, there's not really any powers or magic or anything like that. It's just hand-to-hand combat, and that's just about it. And as it goes further along, they kind of add some more of the elements into it, because it's like, well, there's magic in here. We have these 10 rings. Obviously they get utilized in certain ways. So I was like, okay, I was totally fine with it. And I still like the ending. I'll talk about the ending. I loved. I know I heard some reviews or some people were like, kind of this or that on it. I was like, this is just it got so crazy. I was just like, yes, I love it. I was perfectly fine with it, so I was happy. But the whole movie, I thought was really well done. Like I said, I love the actual martial arts action in it. It was good. It was great even. So I was just super happy about that. So I was just like, yes, there's contact. I was like, that looks like somebody got kicked in the head. I can appreciate that. It at least looked like it. So I really enjoyed it as far as the action is concerned. The story is really well done. The characters, I think, are good. Simu Liu, who I didn't really know. I know he's famous for Kim's Convenience. I hadn't seen the show before. I'd seen like a couple episodes because my mom got into the show on Netflix. I'm in the States, so I didn't know about the show until recently when unfortunately it got canceled. But he does a great job in the movie. So I really like him. I like Awkwafina in this as well. I like all the actors that they had in this. So I thought they all did a really good job. I was like, okay, going through. I was really curious how certain things were going to play out as far as what they did with the characters, how deep into kind of the story of the characters and just specific elements. I'll talk about some of the stuff, getting into spoilers. But I thought they did a great job. Kind of, they even do some unique stuff as far as how they tell the story. I didn't expect them to do, I guess I should say so often, is the best way I can put it without getting into spoilers. But they did something, the way that they kind of told the story, how they kind of pieced it out in a very specific way. I was like, oh, I thought we were kind of done with this portion of the story. And I thought things were just gonna kind of go in a certain direction, and then they don't. And I was like, oh, I kind of like that this keeps happening, because I was kind of just like, I understand the story, and then it was like, well, here's a little bit that you didn't know, and like here's some extra stuff with this character, and here's this person, or here's what they think about this, and it's like, oh, different perspectives and things like that. And I was like, oh, I didn't know we were gonna get so much extra detail as we kind of kept going through the film. But I was like, oh, I like how they do that. So I thought that was pretty good. But all in all, I would definitely say go see this movie. I think it's really well done. I really want to see this the second time. I said that about Black Widow, which I think was also good. Unfortunately, I don't think this is coming to Disney Plus, and I don't think they're doing like the 30-day thing for this one. I hope they do, because I'd love to see it very soon. I just don't, with 2 kids, I don't know if I'll have the time to actually even go and see the movie a second time. But I want to. I definitely want to. I was like, this movie is really good. I like I said, of course, being a martial arts fan, I was a sucker for the action, but the story, how they handled the Mandarin and everything was really well done. So if you haven't seen it, excuse me, go check it out. I think it's definitely worth doing. If you haven't seen it yet, also if you happen to have Disney Plus, they recently put out the one, it's probably already been on there, but they've been advertising it recently, which is like All Hail the King or whatever, which is a reference to Iron Man 3, where they had the dude who was like the fake Mandarin and what happens to him after he goes to jail. There's some stuff in there that they kind of talk about. Like, they did that years and years ago to kind of reference the fact that, like, oh yeah, no, we totally have a real Mandarin. At some point we will, because they knew everybody was super pissed about that when they did Iron Man 3. So if you haven't seen the movie, you can, if you want, you can also rewatch Iron Man 3. I don't think there's not much to it that you really need to see it for. I would say just do the one shot. And I guess look up some random clips if you want to see the fake Mandarin and be like, okay, this is like how they reference the 10 rings and stuff like that. The 10 rings are technically in the very first Iron Man as well. So I think a lot of people were probably expecting the Mandarin in Iron Man, because the Mandarin is actually, he's not the father of Shang-Chi in the comic book. So the Mandarin is actually just like a big villain of Iron Man. And I think some people, I understand why people were so upset, because I didn't know this until probably recently, honestly, because I'd never paid attention to it. But when Shang-Chi first got announced, I think that was around the time I started to find out that the Mandarin, or like the 10 rings, were actually in the very first Iron Man movie. They are technically the ones that kidnapped him in the first movie. So I understand why people were super pissed in the third movie, because it was like, oh, that was referenced in Iron Man 1, and people thought we were going to get like the Iron Man versus the Mandarin. So I understood that a lot more, why people were so pissed. Even I was kind of upset, because I'm like, I know enough from the Amazing series. If you want anything on the Mandarin, by the way, Iron Man Armored Adventures, I think it only got like 2 seasons, which is very unfortunate. Amazing series. It's a young Tony Stark. It's basically the best version I've ever seen of a show that was like, hey, you know how we have this adult character? What if we made him a teenager? Like that, and A Pup Named Scooby-Doo are like the 2 best shows ever for young versions of a character. So those are your 2. But obviously Pup Named Scooby-Doo does not have Iron Man, but you should check out A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. Great theme song as well. But if you want anything on the Mandarin, Iron Man Armored Adventures, I think, is probably one of the best shows you could possibly watch to get a good interpretation of what the Mandarin is. I think they did a fantastic job in that show. That also has an amazing theme song. One of the many great Marvel cartoon theme songs is Iron Man Armored Adventures, so I highly recommend checking it out, at least for the theme song, if not just the entire series and all the amazing stuff that happens there. But I really like the movie. I like how they handled everything. Check out the one shot. Check out the movie as a whole. Getting into spoilers now, so if you have not seen it, don't watch this. But if you don't care, or if you have seen the movie, here we go. The Mandarin was so freaking good. Not just the fact that his whole story was like, I used to be bad, I met your wife. You know, they have the whole fight, which is I thought it was so funny. They're doing the slow motion. It's like, are we fighting or are we fucking? So I love that. The whole thing was funny to me. And so they go through, and it's like he was a bad guy. He conquered for centuries. You know, he lived for a super long time, and then he met Shang-Chi's mom, and you know, she's the one who's telling this story. And so she's like, you know, your dad used to do all these horrible things. He used to conquer, and they show him, you know, doing the whip and stuff with the 10 rings, which I like the way they used them. The 10 rings, for anyone who doesn't know, of course, used to be actual rings on your finger, and they all had different elements. And this, they make them much simpler because they literally, if you have like all 10 rings in the comic books, I think you're probably on the same level, if not beyond, having the Infinity Stones altogether, because it's almost like the same thing. The Infinity Stones are probably more. But I feel like at least one of those rings, I'm pretty sure, is basically the same thing as, like, you know, manipulating actual space-time. So I could be wrong, but, like, if you have, like, all 10 rings, you're basically, you know, on God tier level. Like, no one can really stop you, but it's comic book. So I'm sure someone's done it, and then someone still stopped them because, you know, they have to. But in this, they're much simpler. They're just rings on your wrist. They look super sweet. I will say that. Like, it definitely makes it, it's very martial arts where you have, you know, like it makes me think of Kung Fu Hustle, which of course gets a reference. Also, I know I'm jumping around. When I saw that poster of the Warriors, I lost my effing mind. Nobody ever references the Warriors these days, which is very unfortunate. You need to see the Warriors. If you haven't seen the Warriors, if you have not played the game, which I think technically the poster was probably more for the video game, but they also did a re-release of the film, and it was like the drawing is the cover. So either way, it's amazing. You should see the movie. You should play that old game. I wish Rockstar would effing remake it because it's one of the greatest games I've ever owned. But I lost my mind. I was like, you know, I love Kung Fu Hustle. I saw the poster. I was like, Kung Fu Hustle. That's great. But I saw the Warriors and I was like, dude, they have a Warriors poster. Nobody has a Warriors poster in anything ever. There's never a The Warriors poster, and I lost my mind. But I was very excited by that. But the Mandarin as a whole, like them telling the story from the beginning, he was bad, then he was good. You know, he met Shang-Chi's mom, and then the way that all kind of panned out, and you know, she gives up her powers, and she's like, you know, I gave up my power, but I gained something much better in return. I was like, this is really cool. I like the way this is handled. And then they talk about how they each gave up their powers, like as they continue on, which I think that doesn't even come until maybe another 30 minutes, if not more, into the film. They talk about how he actually gave up his power, because she mentioned she gave up hers, and I was like, okay, she gave up her power, and then he lived as the Mandarin, and I figured like maybe he calmed down, but you know, he still had to do some stuff here and there, but he was still the Mandarin. And then I think, like I said, almost an hour later, they reference the fact that he actually did give up being the Mandarin. Like, he kind of gives his side of the story, and it's like, you know, when I lost your mom and all this stuff, and I was like, oh, he wasn't the Mandarin anymore, or you know, any of the names that he had. He was just a guy who wanted to be with his family, playing, you know, Dance Dance Revolution and stuff. And I was like, oh, it just kept getting deeper and deeper every time they did a flashback, because, you know, she mentioned she gave up her powers. And I was like, okay. And then he talked about it, you know, way later on in the film. I gave up my powers too, and I put the rings away because I knew that she was worth doing that for, and I had something to grow old for. And I was like, oh, this got even sadder. And I was just like, every time they gave more of the actual backstory, I was like, this love story is sadder and sadder every single time. And I was like, that's why I love him as a villain, because his whole thing was just a dude who was heartbroken. And I was like, that makes him the most entertaining villain, period. That's why I said, like, him and Zemo, that's what it was, him and Zemo and Vulture. That's why it works. It's not just like, I'm just the bad guy. It's something where it's like, I know I'm doing a bad thing. At least, you know, as far as the Mandarin is concerned, he was just like, I gotta do this. Like, it was crazy. It was still crazy, and he didn't understand it, which I kind of wish a little bit that they talked about it, but I just kind of chalked it up to, even though it makes sense that he should understand, like, dude, she was dead. Like, you came back home and you saw me look up to you, like, she dead. So he should have understood, like, she is gone. But at the same time, it was a magic voice that was in his head. So at the same time, like, even though he should understand that she's gone, I would assume that there was another extra little element to him being like, no, she's totally here. So I kind of just chalked it up to kind of the whole dark magic thing, where it's like, well, if he's hearing her in general, that's a bad thing. But because a magical being is saying it from another dimension, even, I can kind of chalk it up to him being like, no, it's totally her, and him just kind of being manipulated over and over again to believe that. And I'm like, yeah, I can kind of accept it because of, you know, just the magic element of it all. But I like the way they did it, where it was just like, this dude is just sad. He just wants his, like, the one woman he wants. And like, they even say it when they meet their aunt. He was like, you know, was he still wearing the rings? It was like, he hasn't taken them off since mom died. And it's like, okay, it basically, you know, the dark one or whatever it is, it tells you can have, like, your greatest desire. And his greatest desire wasn't power or money or any of the other crap. He just wanted the woman he loved back. And I was like, that's so sad. and I loved it. I was just like, this is a really good tragic love story. Like if the movie was just his, I'd be like, this movie it almost is just his. Honestly, like he has the best moments. No offense to Shang-Chi, he has the best action sequences, but the Mandarin just has the greatest story elements in the whole movie. It's just like, I love every single second of this. And also, after his wife died, when they do the scene, because I was waiting for, I was like, man, I know, they have the scene with him walking in with his son. I didn't realize that would be so far into the movie. And when he goes in, and it's just like, they do the pan around the room, and they stop on it, and he looks at him, and he's like, okay, like, you stay here, son. I'm gonna fuck somebody up, or everybody. And he just destroys the place. He's just wiping everybody out. And then the dude's like, I don't know where my boss is. It's like, okay. Boom, and he just hits him and kills him in front of his son. I was like, this is such a good scene. Like, it was so hardcore, and it was just like all the joy that he had died with his wife. Like the one person that made him happy, obviously he had his kids, but she was the trigger for him becoming happy. And then she was taken from him because of his past life as well. It wasn't just that she died. It was specifically because who he used to be. And what was up with his security? Did he just get rid of everybody? Like, I understand that he was like, I'm not the Mandarin anymore, but did he get rid of everybody? Because nobody was there. Like, they just strolled up 50 people deep. And I'm like, I guess he just got rid of everybody, because they should have at least had some security. Like, it's a big place. I thought somebody would have been there, but they just strolled up, and it was just like, and I love the fact that she was like, okay, she did her little quarter circle and was like, I got this. And then like 50 other people came in, and she was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, fuck. So I like that. So I thought it wasn't funny, but it was definitely interesting, because it was very clear that she was like, I can do this, I can handle this. And then a bunch of other people came in, and you could see her looking, go like, okay, I might be dead here. But she took out quite a few people, because like when he came in, nobody else was alive. Like, she technically died, but unless the other people just naturally ran off. But I was just like, she clearly killed like quite a few people there. But I really love the way they handled that love story, and just how tragic it was, and how this was just a broken man who, once that happened, it kind of turned his son into a killer. And then I love the fact that they did the reveal of Shang when he was, I'm just going to go with Aquafina because I cannot remember her character's name. But when he was telling her the story of like, he sent me out to, kill someone, and I just couldn't do it, so I just left. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting, because, having the different story elements where it was like, I couldn't do it, but before, I believe he tells that story afterwards, or maybe he says it while they're on the plane. And so after that scene, when they have the fight sequence and, they go to his sister's spot, which was really cool, because they have a reference to, I believe that was a Black Widow in there, who was fighting someone that, oddly enough, talking of Iron Man 3, they had someone who had the extremist powers still, which I was like, that's really interesting. There's still someone who's even remotely alive that has extremists within them. So I thought that was interesting that they even referenced that, because I thought everyone had died, from that moment. So I thought that was really cool. It's like, nope, some of those people did technically live on from Iron Man 3. So I was like, oh, I thought they only made it work with like 4 people. That's how I always felt watching that movie. It was like, they only made that work like 4 times. I guess that wasn't the case. But I thought that was cool. Obviously, also the Wong stuff, he shows up quite a few times. Abomination, that was a good one. Also, the fact that they were working together, and he opens the portal, and there's like a room with like some lasers around the thing, which means he was breaking him out just to do like rigged fights. Hilarious. But that also means that they have him locked up somewhere, and they can pull him out when they need him. Interesting. I just find that very interesting. But, they do the whole part, and they're going through when they do the fight, and his dad shows up. I thought his dad was really, really nice to him, where he was like, hey, like, it's good to see you. I knew they couldn't kill you, even if they tried. I'm glad I was right. And so I did not. I forgot that my alarm. I forgot it was Monday, so that's why my alarm went off. That was my work alarm. But when he showed up and he was so kind to him, and it was just like, I always know where my kids are and stuff. I was like, oh, he's oddly nice. Like, he's okay with his kids. Like, his son didn't do that kill, whatever it was. I didn't realize it was the person that killed his mom until later, because I was like, oh, it was totally the guy that killed his mom, and he didn't kill the person that killed his mom, and that's why he left. And then we find out, no, he did kill him. And I was like, that changed the whole movie for me, because I'm like, what would his dad have done if he didn't kill that guy? Like, if he didn't kill him and he ran off, would he have been so kind to him? Because he kind of, like, he ignores his sister. I honestly don't think they talk at all in the movie, which is really interesting. Like, they kind of show that point to be like, Shang-Chi got kind of both sides of the fence as far as like his mom and his dad, but his sister was younger. She was never allowed to train, and then her mom died so young that all she had was her dad ignoring her. And I feel like he does not say anything to her at all in the whole film. I genuinely don't. Like, they don't even do like a closure, which I think was a unique choice for that movie, where he dies and all this stuff. Obviously, it's Shang-Chi's movie, so he has all these resolutions with him, and she gets like nothing. Like she gets, the end of the movie, and I was like, I think that was on purpose. Like it's, if you're watching it, it kind of almost seems like his sister has like a couple of plot points, like her running like this whole empire. It's like, oh, that kind of seems like it just goes away, and then it's like you get that end credit stinger, and it's like, does it? It does not. So I'm excited for that for sure. I was like, that had me more excited. I was just like, oh, I can't wait to see what they do with this, because I was like more action. But that second end credit, I was definitely more excited for than the first one. Like I love the first one. Also, Bruce Banner is back as Bruce Banner. That's good to me because I want to see a real Hulk. I'm still upset that they didn't have him go like crazy Hulk at the end of Endgame. I'm still very disappointed by that because I'm like, that was the perfect Hulk moment to be like, he lost in Infinity War, he merged to be Professor Hulk, then we get into the final battle, he has a moment with Hulk, and it's like, if I just let Hulk take over, he grows bigger, he bursts out, he's got the short still. This is the perfect moment. I'm like, that would have been so hype, but they didn't do it, and I'm just like, how'd they miss that moment? I'm still sad. So hopefully we'll get that later, but just wanted to note that. But when the dad showed up, he seemed nicer and all this other stuff. And like I said, once I found out that Shang did kill that guy, and it was like, I got that revenge, and then I was kind of just messed up, and so I just left. I was like, oh, that's why his dad was so kind to him, because he did technically do it. And then he's like, okay, he killed the person, he basically got that revenge. And it's like, my son needs time to live his life now. Like he kind of understood that, like, he killed this man that killed his mother. I'm okay because that dude is dead, and he needs to just kind of live a life. And so he kind of just let him go. And I was like, would he have felt that way though? Like I said, if he didn't actually kill that dude, if he left him alive, would his dad have been as kind to him? So I found that interesting, because I was like, oh, that changed so much to me, because I'm like, he's still angry at them, like he still kind of beats them up and stuff, like when they're like, dad, she's dead and all this. It's like, when are you two gonna grow up? And he like, when he flips him on the ground. And I'm just like, oh, this is interesting. Like it gave me something to think about, because I'm like, he did what his dad wanted him to do. And I think that's why his dad was just like, I know where my kids are all. Like, he was totally cool. And I think it's only because he got exactly what he wanted from his son. He sent his son to be a killer, and it worked. And then his son left after that. And I was just like, that changes so much. Like, and I thought that was a really good moment, because I was like, wow, it changed my perspective on the whole movie when he revealed that to her and was like, I did actually kill that guy. And then I just had to step away from all of it because I killed a dude. And I was just like, he trained for it all that time, but his dad kind of forced him to do all that, and it was just interesting. I like the way they handled it. Of course, going through the movie, Ben Kingsley, fantastic. People figured he would pop up. He actually had a much bigger role than I anticipated. Very funny the whole way through it, including the fake death scene, which I knew he wasn't dead. He was just like sitting there, and I'm like, he's not dead. He's gonna get up and be like, yeah, it's fake. And of course they do that. Love the end action sequence. Razor Fist was an interesting character. Just like, he had this over the top car and everything. It was just like, he's an interesting character. Wouldn't say he's good, but he was interesting for sure. So it was just like, oh, that's definitely something. The in-fight scene I thought was entertaining. Them going, having the two armies battle each other, and then of course they see like the demons, that the soul suckers, and then it's like, oh, okay, we should probably, that was like their comedy moment. It was like, guys, we should totally work together. Let them go, and let's all team up and work together. And then of course he's there, at the end. I also cannot remember Shang-Chi's sister's name. I can only remember Shang-Chi and the Mandarin, and he doesn't even call himself the Mandarin. So all I got is Shang-Chi. I'm really bad at this one, but I like the way they handle things, by the end. I love the stuff, with the monsters. Like, I love the visuals for that, where they actually try to physically fight them off. They have, like, Death Dealer, who, I don't think they say that character's name. That's the person that trained him as a kid, who gets killed off. A lot of people do mention, like, it always seemed like that was going to build up to something. I felt that way, too, because I thought for sure what they were going to do to kind of balance out, because I do think they do a good job with his sister as well, but there were definitely moments where I was like, oh, like, she has some cool moments, she even gets to ride the dragon, all that stuff. She does some stuff for sure, but I thought they were going to give her the moment, like, he's off to fight their dad. I thought she was going to be like, okay, I'm taking out Razor Fist, because he's kind of like the main one that we really see, and then I'll take out Death Dealer. I thought that was going to be like her moment, like, he'd fight the main villain, she would get both the sub-bosses and take both of them out, and then be like, oh, this is her moment to rise up beyond what she was forced to endure as a child, where it was like she couldn't even train, and then she beats the person that wasn't even allowed to train her. Like, that's how good she is. She beat the person that, she technically doesn't really even know their moves outside of just watching them. And they didn't do that, and I was a little disappointed, because I was like, oh, I would have loved to have seen that. Like, I love the fight that Shang-Chi had with that person. He was about to kill him. So I was like, I want to see her do that too, and like, defeat him, or if not kill him, at least beat him. And it's like, okay, they're both, it shows that they would kind of be on the same level, Shang-Chi as well as his sister. And then it'll kind of give her a bit more of a push as well, just on the action side. Like, clearly, especially by the end stinger, like she has power 100%. But I would have liked to have just seen her fight more because she was good. Like she was clearly as good as Shang-Chi. So I'm like, why not do a cool action sequence? While he's off doing his thing with Dad, she has her moments as well. And then it was kind of like, no, she was just fighting normal like everybody else. And I was like, oh, okay. I would like to have seen her have her own like specific villain to kind of take on, which they technically had two. And then one kind of turns into her henchman by the end, which was fine. And then the other one, Death Dealer, looks super cool too. Like they really didn't do anything, which oddly enough, that character only exists in like 4 comic issues or something wild like that. I recently saw a book or saw a YouTube video. I think it was Variant Comics. They talked about it. Death Dealer is in like 4 issues in comics, period. All of history, 4 issues to this day. So they did just as much in the movie as they have in the actual Marvel universe. So I thought that was funny when I found that out. But I still enjoyed the ending. Obviously, them having the battle between Shang and his dad, and then him releasing the demons and all that stuff. The visuals for the demons when they would try to use normal weapons against him, and it was like they would just morph around being cut and stuff. It looked kind of gross, and I was like, I like how gross that looks. The lion guards were amazing, by the way. I love the CG on them and just seeing them in general. I love all the outfits. Everything was red, except for some very odd reason. Shang-Chi's sister, she was the only person that had silver, and I was like, that's weird. I know they did it to make her look different, but she also, like, Shang-Chi also looks different than everybody else. And so that, Awkwafina, technically, her character had like the normal outfit of the archers, but I'm like, weird. It just seemed really odd. I was like, I don't know why they did that word. Like, she was the only person. Even the weapons were not made of silver scales, and they just had silver scales for her outfit. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, it's sweet because it looks different than everyone else. But I was also just like, that's weird. That's very odd. Like, not a single person has like green or blue or any other color. It's all 100% red. But just hers, just her outfit. And I was like, that just seemed weird. It just seemed like a really odd choice for them to do that. Like, I understand if that was to be distinct, but it also just made it really odd because it was like, well, Shang-Chi is like the main character, and he's distinct solely based on the fact that he has a different jacket. That's good enough. Just make her outfit different from his, but also red and black. And it's like, it's fine. So it was just weird. And that was something I definitely noticed. I was like, looking through the whole screen, I'm like, red, silver. It's like, it's weird. It looks sweet, like I said, but it was definitely weird that she was the only person that had like silver scales on. I was like, that's odd. That was just an odd choice that they made for the movie. But I love the ending. They fight with their dad. The main dragon actually escapes, kills their dad. He has this moment where it's like, dang, I effed up, and he gives his son the rings and stuff. Of course, they have the fight where he's able to use his mom's power to take some of the rings, and they have that half and half battle where they had to split the rings in half. So I love that for sure. But he dies. He gives his son the rings. They have 2 dragons fight each other. It was amazing. I love the whole kaiju thing, and they're going around. It's like, we got to stop the dragon from stealing this other dragon's soul, and then Awkwafina's character has to do the final shot to save them both, pretty much save everybody, because her master ends up dying off. So she hits the shot. The thing can't suck up the souls, and it was sweet. It was super sweet. And then he puts the rings inside the dragon. He's spinning it around inside its body. He does like a super crazy move and just blows it up into pieces. I thought he was gonna like crush it or something. It was just like boom, and just actual explosion. I was like, that was a super badass ending. Like, he's dropping from so high up in the air, and it's like the water's flying around. It's just so hype. It went full. It was like a full anime mode, and I was like, I'm totally here for that. So I loved the ending. I thought it was fantastic. Obviously, the first end credit scene, like I said, Hulk is back. We actually get to see Captain Marvel. Wong, of course, shows up quite a few times throughout the film. But I love that. And it's like, hey, basically, welcome to the circus. And that was it. Great reference to them finally singing Hotel California by the ending. Going back to karaoke and stuff. So that was good. And then, of course, the second stinger where they say that the 10 rings will return. So, fantastic film. Absolutely love the action. I love the characters. I kind of wish they didn't kill the Mandarin, but I know they kind of had to in order to give Shang-Chi, the rings by the end, because technically he's not magic, which is the interesting thing. And even in the comics, he's just like, he's basically on the Punisher level except for martial arts. Like, the Punisher is not superhuman, but he does superhuman-like things. Like, he's like peak human in some very unique ways. And it's the same with Shang-Chi. He technically has like no superpowers whatsoever. He's just that good. And like, that's just how it is. And I like the fact that they kind of utilize that even throughout the whole film. Like, he doesn't really have magic until he actually gets the rings at the end. And then, of course, he combines his mom's abilities with his dad's abilities. So he has her powers, plus he actually gets the powers of the rings. And the way he uses them is slightly different. He does the big jet boost like his dad does, but he also does things where he'll split them up and, kind of use them as individual steps and stuff. So I love that for sure. But all in all, fantastic film. I know this is a super long review, but there was a lot to talk about with this one because it was exciting. It was really good. I'm depending on what happens, I'll be going to the theaters to see some more Marvel stuff later in the year. So we'll see how Phase 4 continues. But fantastic start. Well, technically, I guess Spider-Man was the start to Phase 4. And so this is just the second movie we've had in Phase 4, if I'm not mistaken. Black Widow technically would be the second, but it was also a flashback movie, so it doesn't technically count as a Phase 4 film. It just appears during Phase 4, but it's not really a Phase 4 movie. But as far as the second film, if we're going from Spider-Man to this, unless I'm missing something in between, I think it's just been all the shows then, Black Widow. Fantastic second film, fantastic introduction to the character. They're building up the East Coast Avengers for sure, because they already have Ant-Man in San Francisco, who doesn't get a reference, which I thought was interesting. They don't reference Ant-Man at all. But East Coast Avengers, they got 2 over there now. So we'll see what happens with that. But love the movie, obviously. I would definitely love to know what you guys thought about it, though. Action, characters, where would you rank this movie as a whole? Where would you rank the villain? Like I said, he's definitely my number one. Not just for the acting, but just the story as a whole. It was a tragic love story. He was a great villain, though. He was just super cool. All in all, definitely my number one villain. Definitely, I don't have a full rank. Like, I always put, like, Winter Soldier was always my number one, but even that kind of flows, ebbs and flows. I love Thor Ragnarok. Also do really like Civil War. So, it always kind of moves around, but I always chose Winter Soldier as my number one. This is definitely in my top 5. I would just have to rank it. But loved it. Want to know what you guys thought about it, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And, of course, thanks for watching.